Yo, so I'm finally back in Virginia. Got all this freaking space that's going to be taken up later on today because our new roommate's going to be moving into this room. But I don't know when he will be moving in, and I don't think this is going to take too much of a recording time. I was wondering if I should use this time to finally make the NT's low-key suck video, or if I should just make this video. And I think that this video is more vital. It was a video request from, I never really knew how to say his name, but Tay Hyson, I believe is what his name is. He's a really cool guy. He always comments on my videos. We talk on Facebook, and he has a lot of good questions. And one of the questions that he asked underneath my ENFX video with Kylisa was, he was essentially bringing attention to the sensor versus intuitive bias. And I think that's a huge, I love that question. He requested that I make a video sort of like explaining the importance of sensors. And I think that that's a beautiful thing to talk about. So that's what we're going to be talking about today, intuition versus sensing, and how a lot of people out there who think that they're intuitives are actually sensors, and that's not a bad thing at all. First off, I'll go ahead and say that sensors make up 70% of the population, apparently, and then intuitives make up 30% of the population. So I've actually listened to this podcast maybe 2 or 3 times, Personality Hackers podcast on the intuitive superiority, and they brought up a very good point. Intuitives tend to feel marginalized, and so because they always felt like the black sheep or the ugly duckling, and they always felt weird around a whole bunch of sensors, then once they find something like the Myers-Briggs model, then all of a sudden they take it and they just run with it, and then they take all of that energy from feeling marginalized and different to now being like proud of who they are, and it comes off more as like arrogance and superiority oftentimes than it would with like confidence, or just like an equal amount of togetherness, I guess, is what I would say. Like seeing like sensors and intuitives on an equal level. A lot of intuitives may even say like, yeah, I believe that sensors and intuitives are equal, but then in their actions and just how they speak about different types, you can just tell like, no, I don't think that they do. Think that like they're equal. So I think that that's like a big thing to know, like how this even started. And on top of that, intuitives make up majority, like by a vast amount, majority of the MBTI community, especially like I would say INFJs and INFPs. Intuitives have just like grabbed onto Myers-Briggs, and they're learning a lot about it, and it's useful because like sensors already have the ability to learn from the outside world. Like the 70% of the population is sensors, and so they already know what's verifiable. Like the world was sort of like created for them. Like Joel Mark Witt, ENFP from Personality Hacker, he said that sensors can be likened to right-handed people who almost never think about left-handed people. Like, you don't just wake up like every day and think about like, oh wait, these scissors, like how this affect the left-handed person, or because most majority of people are right-handed. Like you even forget like, oh yeah, you're a left-handed person. So the left-handed people sort of representing the intuitives, once they finally find a model that they can like actually like work with, that they can actually use to like learn and like grow, then they take it and they run off, and they find more people, like-minded people, and then they start getting this whole like superiority type of complex where they like now feel like they try to put all that energy into like just reigning and becoming a lot more powerful and like embracing who they are. And that can be a little bit intimidating if used in the wrong fashion. And so all of this just to say, like, just to help you understand like where this was already like rooted. 45% of the population is SJs, and then I believe it's like the other 30% is SPs. So SJs use SI, or introverted sensing, which a personality hacker calls memory. And it's not necessarily having a good memory, although a lot of them tend to have good memory, but it's like really good attention to detail and using their experiences to sort of like recreate the experience over again. A very good passion for tradition and being able to just like take in a lot of detail and like verifiable experiences and things that they can like interact with, and like keeping it trapped up here so that they can like replicate it in the future, whether it be a STJ who takes in these experiences or whatever and brings them out in an effective manner using their TE, or an SFJ who like takes in these experiences and sort of like throws stuff like such as like traditional annual Christmas party that they want to be just like last year's because it was so amazing, and they know all of the details that made it amazing, or all of the details on how to make that cookie that was so good that everybody enjoyed so amazing, and how to like replicate it, so stuff like that. And then we have the SPs who are SE users, or extroverted sensing users, and they are really good with using their body. They're very kinesthetically in tune with their body, and these are the ones who like tend to be like great dancers, great performers. They're really also good, like they're just in the moment all the time, and they catch everything that's going on. Well, this is also to an extent, because one time I threw something at my ESFP roommate Tay and he didn't catch it, but there was another time where this dude was dead asleep, and I had my phone and I was trying to like put him on Snapchat, and I'm telling you, this guy was asleep. I didn't have a flash on or anything, and as soon as the phone was like right in front of him, it's almost as if like he had like those Dragon Ball Z senses, and he grabbed my phone and pulled it down. I'm never gonna forget that, because even though as much as I'd like to call myself like a person who like is very alert while I'm asleep, it's not to the extent that he was. And ironically, I'm actually gonna be making a video with him, ESFP interview on Saturday, so y'all should stay tuned for that. But yeah, that's kind of like what SE and SI is. I explain deeper in my perceiving function videos, if y'all want to go check that out. So one benefit of having 70% of the population as sensors is because us intuitives are so into changing and like developing and like just like improving things. And it's kind of like, that's good, but we need stability. Like, thankfully to the SJs, who make up 45% of the population, like they keep all of these changes that we're making stable. And it's not that they also don't bring in stabilization changes, because like we're gonna get to that as well, but that's not their primary focus. Their primary focus is usually like being traditional. It's usually focused on keeping order. One example of this could be if the new iOS, I don't know how many of y'all are like Apple users. I'm a huge Apple user. I'm even recording this off my iPad. I have the MacBook that I'm going to be editing on, whatever it is. So yeah, I'm very heavily into Apple. And if Apple gave us a new update every 2 weeks, like not the annual September update, like, oh, now we're going up to iOS 11, all right, now iOS 12, but like every 2 weeks they had like a new iOS. Yeah, maybe like at the beginning, like we'd be like, oh, yo, this is hype, or like whatever. But every 2 weeks now we have like to adjust to a new iOS. Like I know for me, when the new iOS, the annual ones come out, then I sit down and I try and learn like everything about it, because if I'm gonna have an Apple device, I want to learn how to use it for every single feature that I can possibly use it for, not just the bare minimum. Kind of like why like I love personality typing. Like I don't want to use my mind for the bare minimum. I want to develop it and become the best me that I could possibly be. If we had a new update every 2 weeks, that would be a lot to keep up with, because we barely got time to adjust to the previous update, and we'd fall so far behind. People would be confused all the time, and so it's because of the SJs that we're able to have this stability and orderliness in our world today, and we're able to actually, develop at a more steady pace. And I think that that's very helpful for us who are not capable of, keeping up with the trend. Even NJs and I users, I feel like we're not that good with like keeping up with the new trends as much. Like NE users are the ones who are usually like, oh yeah, let's go this, let's do this, and they just like always jumping into the next ones. But like NJs, I feel like we're kind of like similar to the SJs, where it's like we like a little bit more stability, so that like our NI can even like run the depths and like actually like understand like everything of or like all the components of whatever iOS has already come out by that time. So I think that's a very big reason for having sensors in our population be much greater than the intuitives in our population when it comes to numbers. Another advantage that sensors have is that literally they have common sense. I cannot tell you guys how many times I've had slow moments because I'm over analyzing stuff. I have an ISTJ friend, and every single time that me and her are texting, like, we butt heads, and this could be for numerous reasons, but one of the main reasons is literally because she has such strong SI and I have such strong NI, and so it clashes, especially with our FE and our TE, so it's like literally like nothing's going right for us. And when she'll like say things, then I guess if she was to say it to like another sensor, especially another SJ, then they would catch on to it like really easy. But because like I'm so easy, like my main perceiving function is introverted intuition, and I just like overanalyze things oftentimes, then she gets so annoyed with me, like, Denzel, what did I just say? After I ask a question, like, okay, so what you're saying is, and this is probably due to inferior TI as well, but I was like, okay, what you're saying is blah, 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 and then she's like, what? No, what I'm saying is blah, blah, blah. No, she doesn't even say what I'm saying is, or like try to explain it. It's more of like, that doesn't even, you don't even deserve for me to explain what I was trying to tell you, because I feel like I explained it so simply and you don't even understand. I see this a lot with Tay as well. As an ESFP, he leads with SE, and as I said, like they see things like face value, very in tune with their body, yada, yada, yada. And for Tay, NI is his last function, NI is my second one. So over analyzing stuff is not his cup of tea. He just likes to see things and be like, oh yeah, that's what it is. And that comes in handy a lot of times, especially for like ESTPs such as like Donald Trump. He's the president of the United States, and he looks at certain things and he's like, I don't see why like you just do this, like just pick it up. Like why is everybody like sitting here like over analyzing stuff? Like it's really simple. And to sensors, a lot of times like things are like just quick black and white to them, like it's just common sense. But us intuitives, because we are so involved with what's behind the curtain naturally, we don't try to, it's just instinctive for us to pattern recognize. Then if there's no pattern, or if there's no like complexity to it, then we tend to try and force a complexity to something, and even if the answer is right in front of us, we'll just jump way over it, and then the sensors are looking at us like, that blank face emoji, like, yo, what the heck did this guy just do? It's right there. The answer is right there. What are you doing? And I'm sorry, I apologize to all of y'all sensors for our slowness, every now and then. And maybe some intuitives don't relate. If you do relate, then, make sure to comment. But I know that this is something for me. Like, just on Sunday, I was seeing my sister off at her college, and we went to this Marriott hotel. And I don't know what was going on. Like, I just had a slow moment, and I was talking to 3 people at the Marriott Hotel. I was like, oh yeah, can you guys tell us like where to park? And literally there was a big sign over there saying valet. I don't know if my mind did not click what valet meant, but on top of that, they told me, I don't know what types any of them were, by the way. I didn't think about it, but they specifically like told me that, oh yeah, you know, they basically just told me like, you know, like they're doing valet or whatever. And I was like, oh, okay, so do we like, I asked some question, and then the way they looked at me, they're like, we do valet. And it's like, yeah, true. And it's like, wait, where was my mind at? Like, what was I reading into? And I have those moments like all the time. Like, what were you thinking, Denzel? And it's like, really? Are you like that dumb? And it's not that I'm dumb. Well, a lot of y'all probably think that I'm dumb now for like after saying such a story. But yeah, it's not that I'm dumb. It's just that like I read too deep oftentimes. And censors are prone to doing this as well, but they're less prone to doing this because their perceiving function is dominantly sensing, and then their intuition function comes in later, which is another thing that I wanted to bring up with sensors versus intuitives. All of us are sensors, and all of us are intuitives. I always bring up the cognitive functions, and I like what Antonia Dodge and Joe Markwit said one time. It just depends on where sensing or intuition comes in your stack. You're considered an intuitive if your primary perceiving function is an intuitive function. So if intuition comes in within your first or second function, then that means that you're an intuitive. If sensing comes within your first or second function, second function, then that means that you're a sensor. But there's sensors such as the ISFP, for example, who's commonly known as the most intuitive of the sensors, who has NI as their tertiary function, which is right below their SE. And they're very capable, I've seen this with Jamila, they're very capable of tapping into that NI and using it quite often. It's just that they're better, or their primary function to use is SE. And so it's better for them to use that NI to sort of bring out SE visions, as opposed to me, which is kind of like the reverse. I have my NI right above my SE. So ENFJs are stereotypically often known as the most sensing of the intuitives, because like this is for many reasons, because like we actually like to actualize our visions as opposed to like sitting down and theorizing about it a lot. And we have like, you know, a lot more just like action oriented whatevers. But the way that I've noticed this is that SE being right below my NI, it gives me a more realistic view of the world and a more realistic way on how to like carry things out, my ideals. But I'm still way more in tune with my NI than I am with my SE. And I love my SE, to be honest. You know, a lot of people don't, such as like Kylisa. I used to be like really like hyper or whatever, but my SE helps a lot with analyzation. My SE helps a lot with being able to just have fun. Even right now, as I'm making this video, my SE helps a lot with like bringing you guys the energy that's necessary to keep your attention and acting things out. My SE helps a lot with my style. It's been a long time coming, and you know, now that I, you know, am trying to like, you know, get my style up there or whatever like that, then it's good. You know, I just need more money at the same time. But yeah, SE is a great function, and I'm very happy to have it, even though it's my tertiary function, making it operate more as like a 10-year-old rather than an adult, like my first and second function would usually be like. SE is also great for like comedians. Majority of the comedians that we know today are SE users, and a lot of your friends who are like really funny are usually SE users. Now that doesn't mean that only SE users are funny, but they tend to be the ones who are like the performer, the ESFP, or like ESTPs also tend to be funny too, with like just how simply like their jokes, with their TI jokes that just come straight forward through their SE and all of that. And so there's just a lot of good use for sensors out there, and I think that a lot of people, the biggest point out of this whole video that I actually want y'all to take that I'm going to say now is that a lot of people think of sensors as like, especially due to like 16 personalities, like, oh, I can see that and I can touch it. So that means I'm using sensing. But when I'm actually thinking very deeply and I'm actually analyzing and, oh, I have this psychic ability, now all of a sudden I am an intuitive and I am superior. No, that's not how it works almost at all. There are a ton of intelligent sensors. There are a ton of intelligent sensors. Sensors in and of themselves are intelligent. That's actually a form of intelligence. I see the functions as 8 different styles of intelligence. The feeling functions are obviously emotional intelligence, and even then there's 2 different feeling functions. There's FE and then there's FI. So is your emotional intelligence like that of which you're able to organize other people's emotions and understand them and create harmony, FE, or is it more of like being able to understand and organize your own internal emotions and your values, being in tune with them, and coming out in an authentic way, FI. And so in the same way, people tend to also forget that there's 2 different styles of intuition as well. You have to know like what type of intuition you are, especially like people who say like, oh yeah, I'm an N, and it's like, okay, so what type of intuition do you use? So you give them the description without telling them which intuition there is, and they end up like they don't relate to either one. And it's like, yeah, so you see, because you don't really understand like intuition. In a sense, NE and NI are the 2 different types of intuition, and in short, NI is all about, future pacing and getting into other perspectives and being able to understand the pattern of your own mind so well that now you're able to understand the pattern of other people's mind almost just as well. And then that gives you the ability to be able to predict their behavior or their thought process, or understand where their motivation to like come from, or what motivation is going to come next, because you've gotten so used to how your thought processes actually work as well. And NJ would get information like, hey, let me think about that, and they will unconsciously just have it running in the back of their minds, and all of a sudden they'll have that epiphany, and it's like, aha, and it condenses a whole bunch of ideas into one singular idea. So that's NI. But there's also NE, which is kind of like sort of going in the opposite direction, where it takes that single idea and it brings a whole bunch of possibilities, like, well, this could happen and this could happen, and what if this could happen, or in a parallel universe, what if this happened, and etc., etc., etc. And they're all about the abstract, connecting like crazy abstract concepts together and finding a way for that to somehow work. Like, their minds are just incredible, to be honest. But that is not to say that sensors also do not have incredible minds. Joel Mark Witt once told a story about his ESTP brother who was riding a bike, and he flipped over on the bike, like he was about to face plant onto the concrete floor, and in a swift motion, nobody predicts when they're about to fall, but in a swift motion, because he's an SE user, so in tune with his body, his mind was great in the way that where he just flipped over, like as if he planned it or something. And it's like, wow, that's crazy. If it was me, I would have been dead. In fact, that actually did happen. I didn't die, but I broke my tooth, and that's a whole other story for another day. But yeah, an SE user is more prone to like acting quickly on their feet. And we all just have different types of intelligence. And then the main point that I was saying, I wanted to really point out was that, as I said at the beginning, a lot of people think that they're using intuition when they're not. If your intuition is not matching the descriptions that I just briefly gave of NE and NI, and like I said, you should go watch my perceiving function videos to really understand and even read more about NE and NI and SE and SI from sites such as like typeinmind.com and personalityhacker.com and personalityjunkie.com. Those are like my 3 main sites that I recommend to you. If you are not using intuition in those ways, then you're not intuitive. You like, or whatever process that you used was not intuition. And remember that sensors have intuition, but it's just either last or third, and they still tap into it. Just like intuitors still have sensing, it's just either third or last as well, and they also still tap into it. So one example of this could be SE. Now, if you watch shows such as like Sherlock or Bull, both are clearly, in my opinion, from what I've seen, it's obvious that they're clearly STPs. Whether it's ESTP or ISTP, that's debatable. I'd have to watch a little bit more. But they're clearly STPs. Now, a lot of people would think, especially with Sherlock, a lot of people would think like, oh, well, he's an intuitive because, of course, he's able to like look at things and then be able to know what exactly happened and yada, yada, yada. But no, that's not the case. If you pay attention, he's using SE. He's gathering SE data by like observing everything, and then his NI, inferior NI or tertiary NI, his weaker NI like kicks in and helps, because these two functions work together. And I talk a little bit more about this in my understanding function stacks video. That's probably not the name or title of the video, but it's something function stacks. I recently uploaded it. Y'all can go check that one out for more information on that as well. But there's two, like the functions always come in packages. Like SE always comes with NI, and NE always comes with SI, and then FE always comes with TI, and then FI always comes with TE. And so for the sensing functions, when you always have SE, then SE's usually the one that's like gathering all the information and seeing like, okay, what is actually here at face value, and then NI comes and helps. So a lot of people that we think are like psychic or whatever, they actually are using SE to gather information that they can clearly see, and then they end up getting their conclusion from using predominantly SE. So that's still intelligence. Same with FE, for example. One time I was talking to an ISFJ who swore that she was INFJ, or she just swore that she was not an S, that she was intuitive, because she's a Christian, and she was saying, but she's always talking about, but I have the gift of discernment. I have the gift of discernment. And it's like, okay, sure you do. And it's not that I don't believe her, but it's like discernment, the gift of discernment, or what you would call the gift of discernment, is not necessarily intuition. She oftentimes just has a good read on people's emotional vibe. Like when somebody is not feeling their best, then she taps into that, and she like is one of the first few people to like catch like, hey, this person's not feeling the best, and she'd go and help them out. She'd go and talk to them. She'd go and aid to them. She just knows when something is like wrong. But that's not intuition. That's actually FE, and sometimes that's even SE. And so that's why you have like types like ESTPs or even ENFJs who have SE and NI, and they're able to use their SE to notice like, hey, that person's body language, which is an SE thing, not an intuition thing, it's an SE thing. That person's body language is, giving me this type of vibe. FE also goes off of body language. So when you combine those two, then it's like, this is what I'm reading off of that person. It doesn't use any type of intuition whatsoever. But people would ascribe that to intuition because it seems psychic, when in actuality, the functions that you most likely use were a feeling function or a sensing function. I also talk about like how SE can be likened to like Goku from Dragon Ball Z, when he's about to like get punched, or like, when somebody's like coming up behind him and all of a sudden they like sense it and they like dodge like real quick. That's not intuition. That is sensing, being in the moment and hearing somebody in the grass, and like your ear just clicks and it's like, whoa, your senses caught that, not your intuition. FI. A lot of people think that they have intuition, or that they're using intuition, especially like ESFPs, for example, because they've tapped into their FI. And to an extent, this is kind of true, because as long as ESFPs develop their auxiliary FI, then their inferior NI will get the scraps off of the table and start to grow as well. However, FI has depth. Just because you have depth does not mean that you're intuitive. Intuition does not mean intelligence. That's a huge, I want y'all to walk away with that. Intuition does not mean intelligence. Clearly, I depicted that when I told you about the conversations that I had with my STJ, my ISTJ friend, and even the valet thing. Like, it doesn't mean they're unintelligent, but it also doesn't mean they are intelligent. I know a lot of intuitives who are not, in my opinion, the smartest people. And I know a lot of sensors who are incredibly intelligent, like ridiculously intelligent. Shoot, the person who even got me hip to MBTI is an ISTP. And so it's like, what? Like when I tell people that, and they're like, what the heck? Like, but he's a sensor. And it's like, yeah, so what? It's actually funny. When I first learned about MBTI, I actually got ESFJ first on the 16 personality quiz, and I was like, oh, okay, you know, and like when I learned more about it or whatever, and I actually realized that I was an ENFJ, I started learning about compatibilities and all that, which I should probably make a video on in the future. But when I started learning like more about the compatibilities and everything, I saw that like Jamila ISFP, according to certain sites or whatever, they're best off with ESFJs. I didn't know much about functions. I actually didn't know anything about functions at this point. And so I was just thinking to myself like, oh dang, well now I wanted to be a sensor. I was like, how can I be better? How can I be a sensor? Like what would make me better for Jamila as an ESFJ than I would be for an as an ENFJ? Does that mean now I have to be more in the moment? Like would I have to, like I wanted to practice being an ESFJ. And obviously, like after I learned about the functions and everything, it's like, oh, you know, I love being ENFJ and everything. It's not that ESFJs suck, but it's like, first of all, like compatibility, like me and her are still like working out great. There's always gonna be like some misunderstandings in like every relationship and all of that, but there's like, cut. Pretty much my whole spiel that I've just given to you guys is to, if I had to like just wrap all this information up, it would be to understand the 4 perceiving functions and understand when people are using them and when people are not using them. And then also understand when you are using them and when you're not using them. Understand that intuition does not mean intelligence, and sensing does not mean stupid. Okay? Be nice to each other. Like let's all get along. Let's stop with this intuitive superiority. Sensors can be deep too. Just because they're more action oriented and they're more like into verifiable information does not mean that they don't like to have in-depth conversation. And that's something I just really want all of us to like understand and to grasp. So I hope that y'all have learned a little bit more from that. Hit me up, check out the description. I'm gonna have some links to some podcasts and some other videos that you guys can check out. Comment on like video recommendations or video requests or anything that you wanted me to clarify. Some additional, information that you've like learned. Like and subscribe if you haven't. But anyway, I hope that y'all enjoyed it, and like I said, like leave comments. Let's make this a discussion. Let me know your thoughts. Done.